everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today my topic is about the first person in space. What I think is that without the first person in space, we humans wouldn't even be thinking about space and continuing to push forward on our space flight. The first idea of sending a person in space happened because Sputnik 1, the first human-made object to go in space, was created and successfully orbited around Earth. Then Sputnik 2, which also carried a dog called Lakita, which means barker, was carried onto Sputnik 2. Unfortunately, she died because they didn't know a lot of information about life in space. So that's why a couple hours into the flights she died, because she was all alone. The satellite wasn't really well armed, so she was also shivering or very overheated. So the first person in space involved the Vostok mission. Yuri Gagarin was the first person in space. He was a daredevil because before that, no living organism or life that the scientists knew of returned to Earth safely from space. Yuri Gagarin is known all throughout Russia, so if you even ask 100 of the Russian people, they would probably know Yuri Gagarin. The Vostok mission was continued of rockets and two spacecraft called the service module and the descent module. Gagarin was in the descent module, or the ball-shaped aircraft that went into space, and this was the only thing or object that returned to Earth with Yuri Gagarin inside. The Vostok mission first went because rockets launched it into the air. There were more rockets until the Vostok is fully into orbit around Earth. So that's why then these two modules separate. Then there's the service module and the descent module are left. And these are the air tanks for Yuri Gagarin to breathe in. But around that time, it will also spin to reduce speed once it needs to go down. Since Yuri Gagarin made a full flight around Earth, he had to plunge down into a specific spot because air might run out. So that's why the scientists trained him to go at the exactly right time. When the spacecraft entered the atmosphere, it was on fire, but then Yuri Gagarin gets plunged out like a tiny balloon, and he gets parachuted with an ejector seat. The ejector seat is what plunges Yuri Gagarin out, and soon afterwards, Gagarin continues to descend out of the seat. So that's why when it lands, the descent module, which is the ball, the ejector seat, and Yuri Gagarin all land in separate but close places. Yuri Gagarin spent 108 minutes in space. This was approximately the time that took one orbit around Earth, but on Earth, if you were to take an airplane non-stop about an average pace around the Earth, it would take about 2 days, 48 hours. But for Gagarin, he passed the speed of sound, and that's why he went all the way around the world in 108 minutes. So that's less than 2 hours. Imagine going that fast, weightless. Yuri Gagarin was a hero for the rest of his life, but Vostok was the mission or the spacecraft name. It was considered the service module. The service module is often the module that carries small rockets, engines, and usually supplies for the mission, but the other module called the descent module was where Gagarin was seated in, and it was really protected because there were strong materials. There was an insulated cabin, so Gagarin wouldn't feel as much vibrations. This whole descent model, or this ball shape, was only 2.3 meters in diameter. It was considered pretty squished. But compared to a basketball is 24 centimeters in diameter. So this is way bigger. If you imagine a basketball and a descent model, then this basketball would be a lot smaller. But this was still considered small. The Vostok was also flown by remote control because this was the first time anyone went into space. So that's why no one knew if Yuri Gagarin was able to press buttons because he was weightless. Scientists soon found out he could after Gagarin went on this mission and tried pressing several buttons that were on the instrumental panel. These are one of the only pictures of Yuri Gagarin on the space flight that was remarkable. He was only 27 when he did that for my research. And if I was Yuri Gagarin, I would have been so proud of myself, and everyone in Russia honored him. He was from a town called Moscow. So in Moscow, there was the statue, 131 feet of titanium honored in his honor, and that's the statue in Russia. And the Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin was originally a pilot, but after his remarkable space flight, he never went back to space again because while he was piloting an airplane with his instructor, he died. But before that, everywhere he went, the crowds followed and fans wanted autographs of him everywhere. This is another part of the module, so it's called the ejector seat. The ejector seat took up most of the space, so that's why Yuri Gagarin was smushed. He could see down to Earth within a big hole at the bottom of his feet. So I think if I were him and I was looking down at the Earth through that big window, I would be amazed because this was the first time anyone had been in space. But the ejector seat was also meant for problem issues, like if there was something wrong, the ejector seat, if it was still in Earth, the ejector seat would plummet Gagarin out and he would land in a net. It would slowly drift down to Earth, and that's how he got saved. But on the Vostok mission, something went wrong because at the time when the two modules were supposed to separate, or the green part from the white part, they couldn't because the wires were all tangled together. But Gagarin luckily survived because at the last second the wires broke, which caused Yuri to become very violently shaking. I think the first person in space is a daredevil, especially Yuri Gagarin, and for me, I wouldn't have even dared to go to space, especially if I knew I was the first person to ever experiment. Thank you for listening. I hope you like and subscribe to my